A surprising amount of you wanted this, so I guess that I'm going to give it to you. It's time for my spoiler jam-packed edition of Star Wars Episode 9. I guess it's not really a review because you've probably already seen my review, or maybe not. I thought the movie was meh. Meh was the best that I could give the dang thing, and I'm going to go in depth with you, all of you, as to why I thought the movie was just meh. Now, we don't need to really put the visuals into perspective because Star Wars has done really good with that. When Disney took over Star Wars and decided to make a new trilogy, they promised that they were going to return to the roots, visually speaking, and use a lot more props and a lot less CGI. And they kept to that. With this movie, it looked great. It honestly looked really good in pretty much every scene. I had no complaints in the times that they used CGI or anything. It was fine. So we're going to set that to the side because it really does not matter all that much. Let's start with the characters because the acting in this movie was great. I didn't think anybody played poorly. I think that everybody acted really well. They played the roles that they were given very well, and it's as simple as that. Some of the writing was not that fantastic. Rey has always been such a problem. She's just perfect at everything that she does. Guess who her parents are? Her parents are related to Palpatine. I don't remember, or even if they covered which one of them was the child of Palpatine, but one of them is, which means that Rey was the grandchild of Palpatine. This is a very forced thing. I don't know if this is something that they wanted to put in originally. I think that is a possibility. I could see how that could have been built up over time, but still, why, did the Force just kind of skip a generation? What the heck was going on with that? I don't know. They dropped Rey off on the planet and then they called it a day. I can definitely see how she was being hidden because she was Palpatine's kid. That grandkid. That could be something. So that's not too poorly written, but it really doesn't explain a whole lot. Palpatine's strong. He is very strong with the Force, but he's not some sort of god. He's certainly not. He never mastered immortality. He didn't achieve some of the things that previous Sith Lords managed to do. There were other Sith Lords in the past that blew him out of the water. Darth Bane is canon because he showed up at the tail end of the Clone Wars series. And I gotta tell you, that man could trounce Palpatine any day. Any day. Don't you even tell me otherwise. Bane was the man. He brought the heat. Literally. If thought bombs produced heat, I guess that I'm not really entirely certain about that. But in any case, Palpatine was nothing extreme. So why was Rey? Honestly, she is like the solution to every single problem. She was the solution in episode 7. She was the solution in episode 8. And here in episode 9, she was the solution again. She gets to the final battle after facing all this turmoil, finding out you're Palpatine's granddaughter. That means that you're destined to be evil. That's just how it works. Guess who was related to another villain? Luke freaking Skywalker. And you know what Luke freaking Skywalker did? Not become evil. He had a very brief time where he was worried about becoming part of the dark side. And guess what? Just take a wild guess. That was with his own father talking to him and trying to convince him to join the dark side. Not some little Kylo Ren wussy boy being like, you should join the dark side, your granddad's Palpatine and you need to do it because it's the dark side, but let's kill Palpatine, okay, because that sucker needs to die and then we rule together and all that stuff. No, that's not. She faced 100 times the amount of turmoil that Luke had. so much more inner conflict in finding out who her family was. Luke went through the exact same thing and did a whole lot less. And apparently, Luke was the freaking chosen one and had a fraction of the amount of power that Rey seems to have. Rey trounced Palpatine in the same way, too, that Palpatine has lost multiple battles. Honestly, I don't know what it is, but someone's so smart enough to overcome the entire Old Republic and from the inner workings become the Galactic Emperor, somehow doesn't seem to realize that Force lightning against lightsabers does not work very well. But he did it. He freaking did it anyway. And you know what else? One lightsaber was enough to hold back the lightning. Two lightsabers apparently amplifies the reflection an unheard of amount. And I don't really understand the logic behind that. But okay. She just beats him too easily. She literally just reflects the lightning back to him and it disintegrates him and then somehow causes an enormous explosion. And I don't get that. And I know I mentioned in my review the fan servicey bit, the way that she's almost dead. She has her life force sucked right out of her to the point that she is on the brink of death. Right after she finishes off Palpatine, just by reflecting lightning. She doesn't even have to use any powers. She just holds the lightsabers up and reflects them back at him. And she was so close to death that she dies immediately after that. But somehow, right before that, she couldn't even get up. She couldn't get up or anything like that. And then she hears a ton of Jedi, which I admit, this was pretty dang cool. She heard, I swear, it was Ewan McGregor. I'm almost positive of it. Obi-Wan Kenobi give her a speech. And then she hears Yoda. She hears Mace Windu. She hears Luke Skywalker. She hears Leia. She hears a whole bunch of other Jedi all talk to her and say that they are with her. And then she just stands up and does it. And in terms of fan service, she could have stood up and all of those Force ghosts could have been there behind her. They didn't even have to do anything. They could have just been there. And that would have been so much better. Don't get me wrong, that little fan service bit was neat, but it shouldn't have been the solution to the problem. So you should have at least, if you're going to do it, make the best out of it. Now, Palpatine. I liked Palpatine. They wrote him back into the story in kind of a convoluted way, but that actor plays the role so brilliantly. Even decades after, like, he first assumed the role of Palpatine, the dude's been doing it for so long. He still rocks that role. He does it so well. And that's one of the main reasons I don't flat out hate this movie, is because the acting is actually really good. He is still Palpatine. You can still feel it. You can see it. At the very least, he was written to be Palpatine. And he does that. He's got that creepy aura. Honestly, I had chills going down my spine right before the final battle started. Rey goes down to his throne, and he's not sitting on it. And then you hear him talk, and the camera pans over to him, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's shivers straight down my spine. Palpatine was well written. You can say what you want. He was well written. He was a true Palpatine feeling person, and the actor still nails that role. Poe was okay. He was not that bad. He was okay written, but he was kind of put on the sidelines. He didn't do all that much this movie, and that kind of disappointed me. And in terms of being put on sidelines, Finn. I kind of liked Finn. I didn't think that he was a bad character at all, but he did, like, one thing this movie. All that he really did most of this movie was yell, hey, we need to go, over and over again. And speaking of going, they infiltrate the Star Destroyer to retrieve Chewie, because Chewie gets kidnapped at some point. And the stormtroopers are even worse at firing lasers than they ever have been before. And in terms of choreography, any of those like blasters, like the fight scenes that weren't lightsabers, they were just regular people doing stuff, could have been done so much better. When they were in that Star Destroyer, Finn, Poe, and Chewie didn't even take cover half the time. They stood out in the open of a small corridor with stormtroopers shooting at them from both sides, and one of them got shot in the arm. Barely. He was grazed. That was all that happened to him. How? That's not something that's so poorly done. There were sections of the corridor that they could have like crammed themselves into to try and get cover while they were shooting, but they didn't even bother to set the scene up that way. They just left them standing out in the open, especially with Chewie. That dude's like, what? Freaking 8 feet tall? I think he matched Vader in height. Maybe he was even taller, but the dude was freaking tall. And he was a huge target. But nope, he was fine. You didn't even worry about that. He didn't even move that fast. He was pretty much stationary a lot of the time. And speaking of that, Chewie didn't do much. He was Chewie, but really he just kind of became like a whiny little dude. And I understand. I'm not referring to the part where Leia dies, because then of course that is a major heartbreak, like a huge heartbreak. And from that point forward, I would get him being emotionally distraught. But before then, he really didn't do much of anything. In fact, he got kidnapped without a fight. Not even like the slightest bit. He didn't even like call out and be like, hey, I'm in trouble. But like in Wookiee. I can't do a good Wookiee impression, so I'm not even going to try. But in any case, it was just, he didn't do much. He was like a damsel in distress through a lot of the movie. And that bothered me. C-3PO did some stuff. Honestly, the only part that I really felt emotional was when C-3PO's memory gets wiped. It's pretty much alluded in the trailer that that's what's going to happen. Something's going to happen that's going to cause him to be shut down or reset or something, and it happens. But that's kind of glossed over because once they get back to the base, R2 reloads his memory, and then he's all good. Some of the only funny parts of the movie, they try to land a lot of jokes, and some of them just don't really work. But some of the ones that they did were ones that C-3PO did. He's always been a really good comic relief in the series, even in the original trilogy. Just some of the things that he said cracked me up, and that wasn't different in this one. He still felt like C-3PO. And I mean, my gosh, like once his memory's wiped, he's set back to, it's like a factory restore for him. And so he's giving them sass. They're telling him like, hurry up, hurry that rusty metal butt up. And he's just like, how rude for someone I just met and everything. I don't know. It cracked me up. So I like C-3PO. R2 was put on the sidelines, and that bothered me so much. It's bothered me this entire time. I've always loved R2. He was Luke's partner. He was the one that was always on Luke's X-Wing. And you know what, too? Luke's X-Wing shows back up. Rey retrieves the dang thing and uses it. And that was a great fan service moment all on its own. I'm gonna give it that. But that just also reminded me that R2 wasn't sitting in the thing. Now, storyline-wise, that wouldn't make sense. What I mean by that is R2 did nothing. He didn't even go to the final battle. He just stayed at the base like he's done this entire trilogy. Heck, he was asleep for no reason whatsoever in the first movie and only woke up at the very end for, again, no conceivable reason. There was absolutely no reason that he would wake up at that exact moment, but he did. And in this episode, he just did nothing, and I hate that because they literally go and they fight a fleet of Star Destroyers, and they just drop troops onto one of the Star Destroyers, and they send BB-8, but BB-8 isn't even like on that battle. They just kind of like do things manually. You know what they could have used? An astromech droid. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I do apologize. BB-8 was there because R2 was on Poe's X-Wing. Tell me how that makes sense. BB-8 is Poe's like partner. He is the one that is by his side constantly. BB-8 is supposed to be in that X-Wing doing, all the flying techniques and everything like that because the two of them work together the best. But he was on the Star Destroyer rolling around and everything like that, trying to get by. And R2, for no reason at all, was in that X-Wing. And I don't understand that. He's an astromech droid. He could have crossed that Star Destroyer. He could have done everything that he needed to do. They needed to destroy an array in order to stop the Star Destroyers from figuring out like the position that they're in and taking off from the planet. Now, R2 could have flown up to that array and shut it down. I guarantee that. But they found some other way to do it, and then they still had to handle this situation through all these convoluted ways. R2 really could have handled that. He could have. R2 can hack circles around any other system in the galaxy. And even though he's approaching 100 years old, he's freaking old, but he could still do the job. And they always just give him the shaft, and I hate that. What other character? Kylo. I liked Kylo in this one. I thought that he was all right. He's the one character who has had plot properly develop throughout the trilogy. He's always had the sense of turmoil. You see him and he's still coming to terms with becoming a bad guy, and he realizes it in episode 7, but then it shifts back. You could see the hurt in his heart when he's tasked with killing his mother, and he doesn't want to do it, and he doesn't do it. You could see that he still has good in him, and in episode 9 he realizes it. It's from the death of his mother, who for some reason was weak and about to die, but that wasn't explained. It just kind of happened. But okay, whatever. So he senses her die, and then he decides to turn to the light side. While he's sensing her die, though, Rey gets the upper hand and hits him through the gut with the lightsaber. And then, she heals him though, and then he decides to become part of the light side. He becomes a good guy again. And it's not just a blatant 180 turn. It's something that had built up over time, and I liked it. I especially liked that he had a hallucination, because, the dude's freaking nuts, but he had a hallucination of Han Solo talking to him, and they go through that same bit of a scene where he says, I need to do something, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it, or something along the lines of that. I can't quote it. I'm sorry. But he does that, and he grips his lightsaber, but instead of putting it through his hallucination of his father, he chucks it into the ocean, which, by the way, was kind of a dumb idea. He should have just kept the lightsaber. But because of plot development, don't worry, he had another lightsaber waiting for him the entire time, which was kind of silly. He could have just kept the lightsaber and that would have been fine. But in any case, it was nice. I liked Kylo. I thought that he did a good job. The Knights of Ren finally make an appearance and do absolutely nothing until right at the very end. Palpatine's plan, pretty much this whole time, was to get Rey and Kylo, well, Ben now, because now he's a good guy again, Rey and Ben together so he could suck the life force out of both of them and then restore himself. And for whatever reason, the Knights of Ren get in the way of that when they could have just not. And that brings up another problem. You can teleport items with the Force now, apparently. And I don't remember that occurring ever in the Star Wars universe, at least nothing that's canon. And if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments below, because that would ease a lot of anger that I have. That's part of the movie that frustrated me the absolute most. In that one scene, Rey holds a lightsaber behind her back and teleports it to Ben. And then he starts fighting the Knights of Ren with the lightsaber. But it happens, I think, 2 other times The first time is when Kylo's like talking to her, and then he just like yanks a necklace off of her neck and then analyzes it and finds out where she's at. I don't understand that. If you could teleport items, why can't you just teleport yourself? I mean, think about it. Where's the line at? It's not there. And in the previous two movies, it showed absolutely no hint that the two of them had the ability to do it. Even if it did exist in the universe, neither of them knew how to do it. Neither of them displayed that they even had the urge to try to do something like that. And yet, you open up in this movie, and a good like 10 minutes into it, Kylo uses it. Both of them are masters of doing it. They both have absolutely no problem teleporting items all freaking willy-nilly. They just do it. And that's it. And that is the complaint that I had in my review, is that it's just like a plot development thing. They just found an easy way out to be like, oh my gosh, like, I know what we'll do. We'll just teleport items. Kylo doesn't know where she's at, obviously, so we'll just have him, like, yank a necklace off of her from halfway across the galaxy, and then he'll know it. And then it's just like, oh, well, okay, I guess that's the way that we're going to go and do this now. And they expect me to just be okay with that, which, I mean, there's nothing I'm going to do about it. I can't, but I'm not going to be okay with it. And now, here we are. It's a good couple decades after the end of episode 6. At the end of episode 6, you needed something the size of a moon to destroy a planet. It needed to be that big in order to take on a planet. They actually go into the science of it and explain. They do this in Star Wars Rebels, by the way. Canon part of the series. They show a Kyber crystal, but it's one that's meant to be used for the Death Star. I think they prevent it being used, and then they have to find a different Kyber crystal for it. But in any case, they show the size of the Kyber crystal. The thing is freaking enormous. So now, and hard to find too. Don't tell me that thing's easy to find. They had a lot of trouble securing that thing. They started building that Death Star at episode 3. Like, not too long after Vader becomes Vader, they start work on the Death Star. And it takes them until episode 4, a little before episode 4, to complete the thing and test it. And during that time, it took them that was the thing. That was like one of the final things that they were able to get their hands on, was the Kyber crystal, because those things are not easy to get. And now you've got a fleet of 100 plus Star Destroyers. All of them have the same capabilities that the Death Star did. Every single one of them is able to blow up a planet. How? First off, it's only been like 20 years of technological advancement. How on earth can you perfect that down from being the size of a moon to fitting on the bottom of a Star Destroyer? They just tacked it on. It was just like, hey, check it out. There's like this giant protruding gun coming out from the bottom of Star Destroyer, and now everything can blow up a freaking planet. I understand that you need to up the ante a little bit, but you didn't need to do it that much. Because you got to remember that nobody has fleets anymore. The First Order lost most of their fleet. The Resistance lost all of their fleet. They had really nothing left. You didn't need to do a lot. Palpatine could have presented 10 freaking regular Star Destroyers, and that would have been enough for them to quell all of the rebellion that was going on in the galaxy again. They already blew up the New Republic in episode 7. They didn't have to do anything else. They were good. They just needed a little bit to get an upper hand. But instead, they made an entire fleet of Star Destroyers, and they made them all capable of actually destroying stars. Like they could just decimate solar systems with ease. So then you decide, oh, okay, well, we need to find a way to beat them. So let's go ahead and, go across the galaxy and get every planet to participate and send in everything that they can. So they show up with a whole bunch of vessels, and they say, who are these people? Like, they don't have a navy anymore. And they're like, no, it's not a navy. They're just people. Those are just people, because a lot of those vessels are military-grade vessels. They've all been equipped with weaponry to try and take on Star Destroyers with. So how are they all just like people? You can't tell me that. There was an entire fleet that rivaled that 100 plus Star Destroyers that just popped up. They were there. Suddenly, boom. The whole problem that went on with episode 8 where not a single ship would come to their aid. And really, just a few. If those people showed up in episode 8, that would have been it. And they didn't have a real reason to be afraid in episode 8 because nothing had really happened. Starkiller Base was destroyed. The only reason they became really afraid in episode 9 was because they sent out one of those star-destroying Star Destroyers and they destroyed a planet with it. And then suddenly the rest of the galaxy was just like, frick sticks. Like, we're done for now. We all got to be hidden. We're all scaredy poo. But in episode 8, that would not have been an issue. So where were all of those ships before? They could have decimated the First Order with absolute ease if that were the case. So I really think that they should have toned it down a bit. Like 10 Star Destroyers would have been perfectly fine. And then you wouldn't have written yourself into this thing where now you have to kind of wonder where the frick all of those people were at during the events of episode 8. Because that was such a huge plot point, was that nobody came to help. And now everybody came to help. Like, I freaking swear, there wasn't a single soul that didn't. And also, why didn't you pay like a little homage to Mandalore? Just a little one. Like, you've got the Mandalorian going on right now. So you cannot tell me that every single Mandalorian in existence is dead by the time this movie took place. There's just no way. You get a fan service a little bit with that. That's not something that you can like actively hold against them. It's just an idea that would have been neat. But in any case, that battle goes on. Palpatine showcases his strength, which is kind of OP. Like, it also made me wonder even more how Rey just beat him with absolute ease. But in any case, he shoots lightning up into the sky and immobilizes the entire fleet of ships that showed up. This is like hundreds of ships. And he just immobilizes them all. So what do those Star Destroyers do during that time? You just sit there and watch the show, obviously. That's just what you got to do. You got to enjoy the light show because there's a lot of pretty lights going on and everything. They're not immobilized. They could shoot, but they just didn't. They just left the ships and let them slowly fall as if, oh yeah, like everything's fine. We've won. Good. Crack the champagne, boys. Like we're going home. And that's not the case. Because then Palpatine gets distracted just out of nowhere because, Rey is still there. And then they're fine. They just go ahead and just go up. And then they just blow up the whole freaking fleet of Star Destroyers. That's it. That's the end of the fight right there. They don't fight back at that point anymore because I guess that they didn't have any guns underneath. And I guess they spent the whole time building Star Destroyers and they forgot to build TIE fighters to defend it with, or TIE bombers, TIE interceptors, everything. I really didn't see very many of those kinds of ships, which also makes me wonder too, who the frick was manning all those Star Destroyers? Because they were all manned. They all had people on them, properly like piloting them and everything. Who the heck were they all? This was described as like some sort of like Sith army. But what Sith? There weren't Sith. I don't know who those people were. It was too much. They didn't need to do that much. They just did too much. They literally wrote themselves into a corner, and I don't get why. And with so many things, honestly, like, this part isn't really their fault. They should have kept the same director for all 3 movies because they had to go back on a lot of things that they wanted to do. Episode 7 came up. Snoke was built up very similar to the way that Palpatine was built up in episode 4. They were a good parallel to each other, and Star Wars is meant to be that. It's like it's a story with ebbs and flows. George Lucas always described that it has parallels all the time, and it's supposed to. It's like a space opera or whatever it's supposed to be. But in any case, it paid great homage to episode 4, and that's one of the reasons I really liked it. They built up Snoke in the same way that they built up Palpatine. He was just this mysterious figure that was kind of giving orders in the background, so you know that he's the big cheese, but you don't know why. You know that this dude, Kylo Ren in this case, but Vader in episode 4, is a freaking baddie. Like, that guy can bring the hurt. He's scary. So who the frick is his boss? Because that guy must be something else. And I feel like they really wanted to build Snoke up. J.J. Abrams wanted Snoke to be that. And then they got this no-name director for episode 8, and he was just like, Snoke looks kind of stupid. Let's kill him. And so that's what they did. They just killed him off. And then J.J. Abrams comes back, and he's just like, dude, the frick, man. Like, now I have to figure out something. So he pulls Palpatine out of his hat, because Palpatine was the big baddie for 6 episodes. He was the big villain up until this trilogy. Even in Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, he makes appearances. In The Clone Wars, he actually, presents himself as Palpatine undercover in certain situations and just straight up, did full Palpatine crap. He did some sinister stuff in the background all the time. And that's how they always showcased him. So he was always doing something in the background as a big old baddie. But he was supposed to be dead in episode 6. And I guarantee J.J. Abrams did not plan to bring him back. But he had no choice. So I cannot count that against him. Because if you kill off the villain that you wanted to build up in episode 7 all the way up to episode 9, if he dies in episode 8, and then you're like, well, frick, who am I going to present now? Because you can't present someone new and build them up. They can't just show up out of nowhere and then be some ultimate evil that they have to face, and you care. Because you're not going to see that. It's like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they built Thanos up. You saw him for years slowly becoming more and more prominent. You really got a feeling of how strong this guy is, how intimidating he is, and what his mission is, what he wants. You would not have been able to accomplish that in a, 2-hour 20, 2-hour 40 minute, not even a 3-hour movie that J.J. Abrams was stuck with for the final slot of this trilogy. So he did the best that he could with the villain that he chose. And Palpatine was well written. That's the one redeeming quality that I can give. Palpatine coming back into the story was pretty well convoluted, but it was the best that they were going to possibly get out of that. Palpatine was the best that they could do, because whoever that second director was fricked it up. He just fricked it all up, and I don't, whoever it is, I don't like you. I don't like you. You're like whoever made season 8 of Game of Thrones. No. See, I don't even know these guys' names because they are dead to me. But in any case, because they had to go and bring Palpatine back in and everything, he literally showed back up off screen in the word crawl. He just kind of showed back up, and that was really it was a movie and a half worth of stuff rushed into one movie, and that's one of the reasons why they had to find those easy exits. And I get that, but my gosh, why didn't they just keep the same director for a trilogy? Why would you not do that? That's just a dumb idea to do. And that messed up the series. It did. And so this movie was meh, because the acting, I thought was great. The visuals were great. The plot in general was okay. Palpatine was well written, but it was so rushed. There were so many things that if you think into it at all, you're like, what? No, I can't do it. And the final thing, after all was said and done, they defeated Palpatine. Kylo comes and he brings Rey back to life, and then they kiss. I get that they've had a connection this entire time, but it really didn't feel that romanticized. Why? Why would they kiss? And then he dies immediately. It was just like that kiss was so freaking good. That was it. But I know in reality, he healed her and used the energy that he had left to do it. You know what happened right after that? He became one with the Force, which is cool. That's fine. Anakin did it when he died. Why couldn't he be able to as well? But then Leia became one with the Force too. And this was at least a day after she died. She had been dead for a while, and then she just kind of became one with the Force, and I don't understand that. I thought when you died, you pretty much immediately became one with the Force. And also, when Rey died, why didn't she just become one with the Force? Since the Jedi are with her, or she's with the Jedi, or whatever, like all the Jedi backed her. She clearly is like the god of the Jedi universe, like the Superman. Like she just shows up and saves the day. She died, and then her corpse was just there until Ben showed up and was just like, "All right, I'm a heels," and then he did. I don't get it. Like it didn't make any sense. But then he died, and he immediately became one with the Force. It wasn't even like, it was immediate. And then they didn't even, you would think like at the end of episode 6, they showed all the people that you know are one with the Force. They show Yoda, they show Obi-Wan, and they show Anakin all there during the celebration as Force ghosts. But in this one, you don't get something like that. And that is like, it's a simple like, come on, man. Like, you know these people are Force ghosts. You've already got Ewan McGregor to do a series on Disney Plus. Like, you got the guy. Why don't you ask him, hey, man, you want to be in episode 9 for like 25 seconds? I know that we gave you like a couple lines because he set out a couple lines in the movie, but he's just like, would you mind like putting on a good old-fashioned Jedi robe and just kind of standing there looking all handsome and regal like you always do because you're a good-looking dude, because he is a really good-looking dude. But like they didn't do that. They showed Luke and Leia briefly, and those are the only two that they showed. And I get that those were the two that were closest to Rey, but why didn't they just fan service it up and show them all? Like, come on, man. Like, that would have been so cool. But they just didn't do it. And Rey went to Tatooine and declared herself a Skywalker to some random old woman that watched her use Force powers to bury a couple of lightsabers. She buried Luke and Leia's lightsabers. And what? First off, that old lady watched you do it, man. You're going to leave that planet? She's going to dig up those lightsabers and sell those things on the black market because they are worth a small fortune, and she looked broke AF. She needs that money, and she needs it bad. But in any case, like, she just, like, the old lady's just like, who are you? For some reason, the abandoned, like, place that Luke lived in at the beginning of episode 4, you know, of course, his aunt and uncle were killed, and he left. And then they just never went back, as far as I know. It was still in perfect condition. Like, sand dunes, if you don't know, they don't stay stationary. Like, here in America, Vegas is slowly just becoming desert because the dunes are slowly just shifting over to it. That's why in certain, like, movie interpretations of a post-apocalyptic Vegas, you see it covered in sand. That's because the dunes move. They don't stay stationary. And yet Tatooine, none of the sand, like, covered it up. You would think after, let's see, by the end of episode 4, it's a good 30 years, maybe like 35 years. You would think that place would have been at least halfway buried, but no, it was perfectly fine. Like, it looked like it looked like that fam just got killed yesterday. So I guess it's whatever. But like, why go there and bury it? What real significance does that place have? Honestly, why not bury it in Yavin 4? That seems like a real place to do it, because that's a place where you really got the first major victory. Not just for Luke. Luke grew up in that place that his aunt and uncle were in, but that's not where his journey was really at. It's not even where his journey really began. Because Han encountered him and Ben, like, found him. It's not, it just doesn't bear all that much significance. He leaves there and he never looks back. It doesn't matter. That place mattered to Anakin. Tatooine meant a lot to Anakin. But to Luke, it was just a place that he lived at. And he had a couple family members that he loved. But they were the reason that he cared about that place. It wasn't Tatooine itself. And I didn't get the significance to that. It seemed really unnecessary. And then she built a new lightsaber, which is gold. That's cool. Like, go off the beaten path. Come up with a new color. Why not? Do you, yo. Do you, Ren. But why not keep those lightsabers and use them? She showed in this movie, she sees like an evil version of herself, and that evil version of herself really like, I don't know, discusses like, she uses like this weird dual lightsaber thing, and then Rey also starts to like dual wield stuff. So why didn't she keep just one lightsaber? I don't know. I'm just ranting on now at this point. I think I'm good. I think that we're good now. This is fine. So the movie's meh. If you watched all 40 minutes of this, good for you. I do appreciate it. I don't get why you did it, but thanks, guys. And yeah, that's it. Bye.